The wooden frame of my childhood home's doorway felt cold against my palm as my mother's voice tore through the air, commanding me to get out and never return. 28 years of memories crystallized into this single moment of rejection. 7 years of mortgage payments flashed through my mind every month since I turned 21, $1,700 transferred faithfully while my father nursed his back injury, all because I refused to co-sign another loan for Jake's business schemes. This time, my no meant no. 3 months before that explosive evening, I sat at my desk reviewing bank statements when the pattern emerged like a photograph developing in slow motion. The mortgage payments I'd been sending religiously weren't reaching the mortgage company. $1,700 monthly over 7 years and $47,000 had vanished into a different account. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced the routing numbers. The receiving account belonged to Jake. Sunday dinner arrived with the scent of pot roast and betrayal. I placed the printed statements beside my mother's china, watching her face transform from confusion to defiance. My father's fork clattered against his plate as the evidence spread across the table like spilled wine. "We had no choice, Edna." My father's voice cracked, his weathered hands gripping the table edge. Jake owed money to dangerous people. They threatened to hurt him. My mother's reaction came swift and sharp. "How dare you question what we do for family after everything we've sacrificed for you?" Sacrificed. The word tasted bitter. "I've been paying your mortgage since college. I gave up graduate school to keep this roof over your heads." "You always were selfish," she spat, her face flushing crimson, "thinking only about yourself while your brother suffers." I reached into my purse, pulling out my phone with deliberate calm. "You should know something. I've been recording this entire conversation." The small device sat between us like a grenade with its pin pulled. "My lawyer says what you've done constitutes fraud. 84 months of diverted payments. Federal crime." The silence that followed felt heavier than 7 years of financial burden. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My father aged 10 years. In 10 seconds, his shoulders crumpling under the weight of exposure. "Lawyer." My mother's whisper barely carried across the table. "You hired a lawyer against your own family." "No," I corrected, standing slowly gathering my evidence. "I hired a lawyer to protect myself from people who happen to share my blood. There's a difference." The pot roast grew cold as accusations flew. My mother called me heartless, ungrateful, a disappointment. My father begged for understanding, painting pictures of Jake's struggles with addiction, his debts to bookies, the threats that came in the night. Each word felt like another brick in the wall between us. "I'm not pressing charges," I announced, watching relief flood their faces. "Yet, but this ends now. Every cent gets repaid or I take this to the FBI." My mother's relief transformed back to rage. "You wouldn't dare destroy your own family." "You already did that," I replied, heading for the door. "I'm just documenting the damage." Sandra Martinez's office smelled of leather and justice. The attorney, a woman in her 50s with silver streaks through black hair, laid out my options with surgical precision. Criminal charges would mean prison time for my parents. Civil court could recover the money, but destroy any chance of reconciliation. The third option felt like threading a needle in a hurricane. Mediation, she suggested, sliding a contract across her mahogany desk. They agree to repayment terms. You avoid destroying your family while protecting your interests. The coffee shop on Maple Street seemed neutral enough for our meeting. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth with clear sight lines to both exits. My parents entered looking smaller somehow, as if guilt had physically diminished them. We ordered drinks nobody would finish. 5 years, I stated, pushing the contract across the scratch table. 800 monthly payments, interest at 3%, every payment documented. My father reached for the papers with shaking hands. My mother slapped them away. "How dare you treat us like criminals?" Her voice carried across the cafe drawing stares. We're your parents. We changed your diapers, put food in your mouth, and then stole $47,000 from me. I kept my voice level professional. This is generous. Sandra wanted to recommend prosecution. Your brother needs us, she hissed. He's sick. Addiction is a disease. Zap! So is enabling, I countered. And you've been patient zero for 20 years. The bell above the door chimed and my stomach dropped. Jake strutted in like he owned the place, his arm around a blonde woman who looked barely out of college. His swagger faltered when he spotted us. Perfect timing, my mother brightened, waving them over. Jake, honey, tell your sister about your wonderful news. My brother's grin spread wide and false. Hey, sis, want to meet your future sister-in-law? This is Brittany. We're moving back home while we get on our feet. Baby on the way and all. Brittany's hand moved to her perfectly flat stomach in a gesture so practiced it screamed deception. My parents beamed like they'd won the lottery. The trap snapped shut around me. Moving home, I repeated slowly. Into the house I pay for. Oh, family helps family. Jake shrugged, pulling out a chair. Right, Mom. Of course, my mother cooed, reaching for Brittany's hand. We've already cleaned out the guest room. Our first grandchild deserves a stable home. When did you decide this? I asked, though the answer already burned in my chest. Last week, my father admitted, unable to meet my eyes. They needed help, and we had the space. But space I pay for. The words came out sharp enough to cut. In a house facing foreclosure because you stole my payments. Now you're moving in a son who owes half of Chicago money and his conveniently pregnant girlfriend. Don't be dramatic. Jake laughed, but his eyes stayed cold. Besides, once you sign that little paper, everything's square right. Water under the bridge. I stood, leaving the contract on the table. The only thing under the bridge is the $47,000 you helped steal. Good luck finding space in a house the bank's about to own. Grace's flight from Seattle landed at 6, and by 7, she stood in our childhood home looking like she'd stepped into a war zone. Her suitcase barely hit the floor before she discovered Jake's possessions sprawled across her room like an invasion. What the hell is this? She held up one of Jake's dirty shirts between two fingers, her nose wrinkled in disgust. Language, Grace. Our mother swept in arms full of fresh sheets. Your brother needed the space. You're hardly ever here anyway. Because I'm in law school, Grace shot back, which you'd remember if you ever called for anything besides money. The formal family meeting convened at 8 in the living room that still bore the stains of 30 years of dysfunction. I came armed with 7 years of bank statements, every transfer highlighted in yellow. Grace brought her own ammunition, 3 years of tuition bills she'd paid herself. Let's review. I began spreading papers across the coffee table like tarot cards revealing our future. $1,700 monthly for 84 months. That's $142,800 I've paid. Jake's contribution, I held up a blank sheet. 0. I've been sick, Jake protested from his spot on the couch, Brittany glued to his side. Sick with a gambling problem, Grace interjected, which is why Mom and Dad emptied my college fund 2 years ago. $15,000 to keep bookies from breaking your legs. Our parents sat frozen as their daughters laid out the evidence of years of financial favoritism. My spreadsheets showed every diverted payment. Grace's documentation revealed a pattern of theft going back to high school. You told me my fund got lost in the market crash. Grace's voice broke slightly. I took out loans, worked 3 jobs. Meanwhile, you were bailing out Jake from county lockup. He's our son. Our father finally spoke, his voice hollow. We couldn't let him rot in jail. But you could let your daughters drown in debt, I asked. Grace has $60,000 in student loans because you gave her college money to your addicted son. The room exploded in accusations and denials. Jake called us spoiled princesses. Our mother accused us of ganging up on family. Brittany sat silent until Grace's next question hit like a lightning bolt. So when's the baby due? Grace asked, her lawyer training showing. You must have medical records, prenatal vitamins, doctor's appointments scheduled. Brittany's composure cracked. She glanced at Jake, who suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Tell them, Brittany whispered, tears starting to flow. Shut up, Jake warned. I can't do this anymore. She stood abruptly, mascara running. There's no baby. There never was. Jake made me lie because he said your parents would let us stay if they thought a grandchild was coming. The confession hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Our mother's face cycled through shock, betrayal, and rage. Our father seemed to shrink into his recliner. Grace and I exchanged glances that said everything. You lied about a baby. Our mother's voice came out strangled. Jake, how could you? Because I knew you'd fall for it, he snapped, abandoning all pretense. Just like you always do. Wave a grandkid in your face and suddenly your wallet's open. Get out, our father said quietly, then louder. Get out of my house. Your house, Jake laughed bitterly. You mean Edna's house, the one she pays for while you play favorites. But our father stood something we hadn't seen in years. I said leave. Now. Jake's explosion came with the force of years of buried resentment. He grabbed Brittany's arm as she tried to leave, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. This is your fault, he snarled at her. Couldn't keep your mouth shut for 5 minutes. I moved without thinking, inserting myself between them. Let her go, Jake. Or what? He released Brittany only to turn his rage on me. You'll call your lawyer, have me arrested. Face it, Edna, you've been looking for an excuse to destroy me since we were kids. I've been paying for your destruction since we were kids, I corrected. Every baseball uniform you needed, every school trip you wanted, came out of my part-time job money because you'd already blown through yours. Because Mom and Dad always loved you more, he spat. Perfect Edna with her straight A's and college acceptance letters. Loved me more. The laugh that escaped felt like broken glass. They've stolen $47,000 from me to fund your habits. If that's love, I'll take indifference. Our father stepped forward, placing himself between Jake and me. That's enough. Jake, I'm serious. Leave now or I call the police. You wouldn't dare, our mother interjected, but her voice wavered. Try me, our father responded, pulling out his phone. Jake grabbed his jacket, shooting poison looks at everyone. This isn't over. You all owe me. We owe you. Grace stepped forward, her 5'2" frame radiating fury. You stole my college fund. You've been stealing Edna's mortgage payments. You just lied about a baby. What exactly do we owe you? Life, he shouted. A chance to be something more than the family failure. You chose that title, I said quietly. Every time you stole, lied, manipulated. We didn't make you a failure. You did. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the family photos on the wall. Brittany mumbled an apology and followed, leaving the rest of us in charged silence. Our mother turned on me like a cornered animal. This is your fault. All of it. Your success makes him feel worthless. Your independence threatens everything I tried to build in this family. What family? Grace asked. The one where you steal from your daughters to enable your son, where Dad works himself into disability while Jake parties away our money. Traditional families support each other, our mother insisted. They don't hire lawyers and wave contracts around. Traditional families don't steal, I countered. They don't lie about pregnancies or empty college funds. The argument escalated with 30 years of grievances pouring out. My mother revealed her resentment, how my career made her feel like a failure as a homemaker, how my refusal to marry and have children by 25 violated her expectations, how Jake was her last hope for a normal child who needed her. I don't need you, I said finally. I haven't needed you since I was 21 and started paying for the roof over your head. That terrifies you, doesn't it? That I grew up in a way while Jake stayed your perpetual baby. Her face contorted with rage. Get out! Get out of my house right now and never come back. You're no daughter of mine. Oh, fine, I said, gathering my documents. But remember, it's not your house. It hasn't been for 7 years. Marie, stop, our father pleaded. You're being unreasonable. She whirled on him. Don't you dare side with her. It's me or them. Choose. The ultimatum hung between them like a blade. My father looked at his wife of 35 years, then at his daughters. His shoulders straightened slightly. I can't choose that, Marie. They're our children. Then you can leave too, she screamed. All of you get out. I don't need any of you. I looked at my father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Weak, yes, but not without love. Torn between enabling his wife and protecting his daughters. The choice was killing him. It's okay, Dad, I said softly. I'm leaving, but the mortgage payments stop today. Whatever happens next is on you. My childhood bedroom felt like a museum of someone I used to be. Certificates of achievement covered one wall, their gold seals dulled by time and irrelevance. I pulled boxes from the closet, each one a time capsule of dreams deferred for family obligations. The scholarship letter to Columbia's graduate program sat on top, its edges yellow after 7 years. Grace appeared in the doorway with packing tape and solidarity. Want help? Just keep an eye out for anything worth saving, I replied, wrapping my high school valedictorian trophy in newspaper. Most of this can stay. Let Mom turn it into a shrine to her disappointment. We worked in companionable silence, occasionally sharing memories, triggered by forgotten objects. A photo from my college graduation showed our whole family smiling. Jake stood to the side, already plotting his next scheme. Our parents beamed with pride that would sour within 18 months when I started paying their bills. Remember when you bought me this? Grace held up a law school prep book, its spine uncracked. I was 16 and terrified of ending up trapped here. You won't, I promised, sealing another box. That's what the student loans are for. Freedom cost, but it's worth every penny. Footsteps creaked outside the door. Our father hovered in the hallway, his face etched with indecision. He'd aged a decade in the past hour, the weight of his complicity finally showing. Your mother locked herself in our room, he reported unnecessarily. She's calling her sister in Florida. Aunt Sharon, Grace snorted. The one who hasn't spoken to her in 15 years because Mom stole her identity. He flinched at the reminder of his wife's previous victims. That was a misunderstanding. Like the 47,000 was a misunderstanding, I asked, not looking up from my packing. Or Grace's college fund, or the credit cards in my name I found last year. You knew about those, his voice cracked like thin ice. I know about all of it, Dad. The second mortgage you're behind on, the equity line Jake maxed out, the bills hidden in the garage. I faced him fully. I've been managing disasters since before I could legally drink, but I'm done. We'll lose the house, he whispered, as if the walls might hear and crumble immediately. You lost the house the moment you chose theft over honesty. I taped the final box shut with decisive movements. The bank will take it. You'll have to downsize. Maybe rent a small apartment like normal people who can't afford 1,700 monthly payments. Please, Edna, 1 more month, just until I figure something out. With what money, Dad? Your disability checks that Jake intercepts the overtime you can't work anymore. I lifted a box, its weight nothing compared to what I'd carried for years. You had 84 months to figure it out. You chose enabling over solutions. Grace grabbed 2 boxes, her small frame managing the load with determination. We made trips to my car, filling the trunk and back seat with remnants of my old life. Each journey past their bedroom door brought muffled sounds of our mother's fury transmitted through phone lines to Florida. She's telling everyone you're an ungrateful monster, Grace reported after one pass. Apparently, you're trying to make them homeless out of spite. Let her, I responded, wedging the last box into place. Sharon knows better than anyone what Marie's capable of. We stood in the driveway, looking at the house that had consumed 7 years of my income. The paint peeled in places I'd planned to fix. The garden showed neglect I'd intended to address. All the improvements I'd postponed while funding other people's destruction. What will you do? Grace asked. Live, I answered simply. For the first time in 7 years, I'm going to live for myself. My father appeared on the porch, a broken man backlit by the home he'd failed to protect. Your mother wants to know when you'll send next month's payment. The question hung between us, like the last gasp of their entitlement. I pulled out my phone, showing him the banking app. Watch this, Dad. I deleted the automatic transfer with 3 taps. There, no more payments. Tell Mom she might want to call the mortgage company. Maybe they'll be more understanding than I was. Edna, please. I'm stopping at the bank tomorrow to remove myself from all joint accounts. My lawyer will send paperwork about the fraudulent loans. You can cooperate or face charges. I opened my car door with finality. That's more warning than you gave me. Grace hugged me fierce and quick. Call when you get to your apartment. I'll crash with Marcus tonight. Marcus? I raised an eyebrow. The security guard from your building. She blushed slightly. We'll talk later. Go before Mom comes out swinging. I drove away with 7 years of sacrifice in my rearview mirror. My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from both parents. I ignored them all until one made me pull over. From the mortgage company, your account is currently 4 months past due. Foreclosure proceedings will begin unless payment of $11,000 is received within 30 days. 4 months. They'd been stealing my payments and not even using them for the mortgage. The betrayal felt complete. I forwarded the notice to Sandra Martinez with a simple message, they're all yours now. 3 weeks of freedom tasted like morning coffee enjoyed slowly instead of gulped while rushing to generate money for others. My downtown apartment, all clean lines and natural light, felt like a sanctuary designed specifically for solitude. No one else's name on the lease, no spare key hidden under the mat for family emergencies that somehow occurred weekly. My work noticed the change immediately. Without the constant stress of managing family crises, my productivity soared. The Harbinger Industries merger analysis I'd been struggling to complete suddenly flowed like water. Numbers that had seemed jumbled now arranged themselves in clear patterns of profit and potential. Outstanding work on the Harbinger report. Lisa from Acquisitions commented during our morning meeting. Richard's been singing your praises to the board. I accepted the compliment without the usual deflection, another new freedom. The conference room's glass walls reflected a woman I barely recognized. Shoulders no longer hunched from carrying others' burdens. Eyes clear instead of clouded with worry about which crisis would erupt next. Grace arrived that evening with Thai takeout and updates from the home front. She sprawled on my couch like she'd lived here forever, stealing bites of Pad CU between revelations. Mom's in full martyrdom mode, she reported. Posted on Facebook about ungrateful children abandoning their parents. 67 comments so far, mostly from her church friends who don't know the whole story. Let me guess, I said, twirling noodles expertly. She left out the theft fraud and $47,000. Obviously, according to her version, you suddenly turned cruel and cut them off without warning. Grace pulled up the posts on her phone. Oh, and Jake's back. Showed up yesterday with a black eye and a sob story about owing the wrong people money. Where's Brittany? Gone. Smart girl. Left the same night as the fake pregnancy reveal. Grace scrolled through more updates. Dad's working double shifts at the warehouse. His back can't take it. I heard him crying in the garage last night. The information sat heavy between us. I'd spent 7 years as their emotional dumping ground, trained to feel responsible for every poor decision they made. That training didn't disappear in 3 weeks. Not my problem, I said aloud, testing the words like a new language. Not your problem, Grace agreed, raising her beer in salute. How's the promotion hunt going? Actually, I smiled, remembering the morning's meeting. Richard Thompson pulled me aside today. Senior analyst position opened up. $30,000 raise, better benefits, company car allowance. Grace nearly choked on her noodles. Seriously, that's incredible. He said my work's transformed lately, more focused, innovative. Apparently, the Harbinger analysis impressed the CEO personally. I let myself feel the pride without immediately minimizing it. Interviews tomorrow, but Richard basically said it's mine if I want it. You deserve this, Grace said firmly, after everything you've sacrificed. No more sacrifice, I corrected. From now on, I invest in myself. We talked until midnight about futures suddenly possible without family dysfunction draining every resource. Grace shared her plans for law school specialization in financial crimes, inspired by our family's betrayal. Her relationship with Marcus had grown serious, offering stability she'd never known at home. He wants me to move in, she admitted, fidgeting with her bottle label. His place is closer to school and splitting rent would help us both save. But what if I'm just running from one dependency to another? What if I'm repeating patterns? I considered my sister brilliant and scared, standing at her own crossroads. Are you moving in because you need to or because you want to? Want to, she answered after a pause. For the first time, I actually want something just because it makes me happy. Then you're already breaking the pattern. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment, appreciating the absence of chaos. No drunk mother pounding on doors, no father begging for one more chance, no Jake scheming his next manipulation, just peaceful silence and the city lights painting patterns on my walls. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The area code was local, the message brief. Your parents' house goes to sheriff's sale next month. Thought you should know. Sandra Martinez. I deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow, I'd ace my interview, accept my promotion, and continue building a life untethered from people who saw me only as a resource to exploit. The house could crumble. My foundation was finally solid. Richard Thompson's corner office commanded views of the Chicago skyline that still made me catch my breath. The interview felt more like a victory lap, with Richard outlining the senior analyst position's responsibilities while barely containing his smile. The board was particularly impressed with your risk assessment model, he said, sliding the offer letter across his pristine desk. 95,000 base plus bonuses, full benefits package, company car allowance of 800 monthly. The numbers swam before me, more money than my parents had ever seen earned through my own merit rather than stolen from others. I signed without hesitation, my signature firm and confident. Excellent. You'll start Monday. Sarah will get you set up with your new office, 12th floor corner unit. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the senior team, Edna. I floated through the rest of the morning, texting Grace the news and receiving a string of celebration emojis in response. The building's marble lobby reflected my professional heels, clicking with new authority. Everything felt possible until I saw the familiar slouch near the security desk. My father looked like he'd aged another decade in 3 weeks. His warehouse uniform hung loose on his shrinking frame. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and double shifts his body couldn't handle. He straightened when he saw me, hope flickering across his weathered features. Hi, sweetheart. He began, the endearment sounding foreign after recent events. How did you find my office? I kept my voice professionally neutral, aware of colleagues passing through the lobby. Your mother found it on LinkedIn. You updated your profile. He shuffled his feet like a schoolboy. Could we talk? Maybe grab coffee? Every instinct screamed to refuse, but the security guards were watching with interest. Creating a scene would undermine my new position. 15 minutes. There's a cafe next door. We sat at a corner table, his coffee cooling untouched, while he struggled for words. Up close, the deterioration was worse. His hands shook slightly, whether from exhaustion or stress, I couldn't tell. The house situation is bad, he finally managed. Foreclosure auction in 28 days unless we come up with 11,000. I've been working, but my back, the doctor says I need surgery. Then get surgery, I suggested, stirring my latte calmly. Can't afford the time off. Lost the good insurance when I went on disability. He pulled out a wrinkled paper. I've done the math. With both jobs, I can maybe scrape together 3,000 by the deadline. And? And I was hoping maybe you could help with the rest, just as a loan. I'll pay you back every penny. Like the 47,000 you paid back. The question hung between us sharp as winter air. His face crumbled. That was different. Your mother said Jake needed it more. Said you were doing fine. I was doing fine because I worked 60-hour weeks while paying your bills. I pushed the paper back across the table. There's a non-profit on Madison that offers financial counseling. They can help you navigate foreclosure, maybe arrange a short sale. Edna, please, it's the family home where you grew up. Where I grew up being told my only value was what I could provide. Where my college fund disappeared to pay for Jake's rehab he'd never attended. Where my mother screamed at me to leave and never come back. I stood leaving money for both coffees. That's not a home worth saving. There's something else, he said, quickly, desperation creeping into his voice, about Jake. I installed a camera in the garage after some tools went missing. He's been breaking in at night taking things to sell. Then file a police report. I can't. He's my son. And I'm your daughter, but that didn't stop you from stealing from me. I headed for the door, pausing to deliver one last truth. You know what's really sad, Dad? I would have helped you. If you'd been honest from the beginning, told me about the financial troubles, we could have worked something out. But you chose deception. Now you get to live with consequences. The security footage he mentioned nagged at me during the elevator ride. If Jake was breaking into the house, what else was he capable of? I texted Sandra Martinez about getting a restraining order just in case. The pounding started at midnight, violent enough to wake the entire floor. Through the peephole, my mother swayed unsteadily, her usually perfect hair matted and wild. The smell of alcohol seeped under my door like toxic fog. Open up, you ungrateful bitch, she slurred, fists hammering wood. I know you're in there living your fancy life while we suffer. I grabbed my phone, already dialing building security, while she continued her tirade. Neighbors' doors cracked open heads, peering out at the disturbance. Mrs. Chen, from 1215, looked particularly concerned. You think you're so much better than us, my mother ranted, her voice echoing off marble walls. Just like Patricia, running away, abandoning family, selfish whores, both of you. The Patricia reference stopped me cold. My mother's sister, who disappeared 40 years ago, mentioned only in whispers and accusations. I'd never heard the full story, just fragments about betrayal and abandonment. Security's on the way up, I called through the door. Leave now or I'm pressing charges. Charges. She laughed, the sound ugly and broken. My own daughter threatening me with jail. I should have known. You were always cold, even as a baby. Never needed me like Jake did. The elevator dinged, and Marcus emerged with another guard, their expressions professionally stern. My stomach dropped. Grace's boyfriend seeing my mother like this. The humiliation felt fresh and familiar. Ma'am, you need to leave, Marcus said firmly but kindly. This is private property. My mother whirled on him, nearly falling. Don't you dare tell me what to do. I'm her mother. I have rights. Not here you don't, the other guard interjected. Come quietly, or we call CPD. She lunged at my door one last time. 40 years ago, Patricia left me behind with them. Now you're doing the same thing, abandoning me to save yourself, just like her. What happened with Patricia? I found myself asking through the door, desperate to understand this piece of family mythology. She got out, my mother spat. Scholarship to some fancy college. Left me with parents who cared more about their next drink than their daughters. Said she'd come back for me. Liar. Just like you. The guards flanked her, guiding her toward the elevator. She fought weakly, hurling accusations about ungrateful children and stolen futures. As the doors closed, she screamed one last revelation. You look just like her. Same selfish eyes. Same cold heart. Marcus lingered after his partner escorted my mother out. You okay, Edna? You're Grace's boyfriend. I said, unnecessarily embarrassment burning my cheeks. For 2 years now. His expression softened. She's been staying with me to get away from all this, told me to keep it quiet until she felt ready to tell you. 2 years. The timeline realigned in my head. She's been escaping longer than I realized. Your mom's been showing up at Grace's dorm drunk since sophomore year. Campus security has a file. He shifted uncomfortably. I probably shouldn't mention this, but we're worried about escalation. Your mom's drinking has gotten worse since you left. That's not my responsibility, I said automatically, the response feeling more hollow each time. No, it's not, he agreed. Just wanted you to know we're keeping Grace safe. Building's on alert now, too. She won't get past the lobby again. After he left, I researched Patricia Chen online. My mother's maiden name yielded results I'd never thought to seek. Patricia Chen, CEO of Chen Financial Solutions in San Francisco. Awards for business innovation. Philanthropic work with abuse survivors. The same eyes I saw in my mirror every morning, but surrounded by laugh lines instead of worry. She'd built an empire from nothing after escaping our grandparents' dysfunction. Left behind a younger sister who never forgave the abandonment, who spent 40 years nursing that wound until it poisoned everything she touched. The parallels felt too sharp to ignore. My mother saw her sister's escape in my every success. Every boundary I set reopened her original abandonment. I'd become Patricia in her mind, the family member who chose self-preservation over enabling dysfunction. I emailed Sandra Martinez about the building security incident, then did something impulsive. I searched for Patricia's business email and typed a message before I could reconsider. Dear Ms. Chen, you don't know me, but I'm Marie's daughter. Given recent events, I think it's time we talked. Edna Stewart. My phone buzzed with building security alerts. They'd found my mother passed out in her car in the visitor's lot, too drunk to drive. CPD took her for public intoxication. One more disaster I wouldn't clean up. Sandra Martinez's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed the documents spread across her conference table. What started as simple fraud had metastasized into a complex web of financial crimes spanning years. The second mortgage is the biggest problem, she explained, pointing to signature pages I'd never seen. $75,000 taken out 3 years ago. Your signature is forged, but professionally. They used a notary who's now under investigation for other fraudulent documents. Oh, $75,000 for what? I asked, though the sick feeling in my stomach already knew. Supposedly for home improvements and your brother's rehabilitation. She pulled out bank records. The money was withdrawn in cash over 6 months. No paper trail for where it actually went. Jake never went to rehab. I'm aware, but proving that means subpoenaing medical records he'll claim don't exist. Sandra organized the papers into damning piles. There's more. Credit cards in your name, utilities, accounts, even a car loan. A car loan. $22,000 for a Mercedes, registered to Jake but financed under your social security number. She showed me photos from the DMV database. He totaled it 8 months ago. Insurance lapsed, so the full balance is still owed. The room spun slightly as I absorbed the full scope of violation. My entire financial identity had been harvested and destroyed while I faithfully paid their bills. What's the total damage? Including the mortgage fraud, close to $200,000. Sandra's voice carried sympathy, wrapped in professionalism. Your credit score is 390. You're lucky your company ran their background check before this surfaced. Can we fix this? We can fight it. File identity theft reports, dispute every account. But Edna, this level of fraud, prosecutors will want criminal charges. Your parents could face serious prison time. I thought of my father's shaking hands, my mother's drunken raging. What if I don't want them in prison? Then we negotiate, but leverage requires willingness to follow through. If they sense you'll cave, we lose everything. My phone rang, displaying a San Francisco number. Patricia Chen had responded to my email with shocking speed. I excused myself to take the call, stepping onto Sandra's office balcony. Edna. The voice was mine, aged 30 years, carrying authority and wariness in equal measure. I received your message. After 40 years of silence from that family, I admit I'm curious. My mother, your sister, she's imploding. Keeps comparing me to you, saying I abandoned her like you did. A long pause, then a sigh heavy with decades. Marie always did have a gift for revision. I didn't abandon her. I escaped and offered to bring her with me. She chose to stay, thinking she could fix our parents, save them from themselves. Sound familiar? Painfully so. Let me guess you've been funding their lifestyle while they drained you dry, and now that you've set boundaries, you're the villain. 200,000 in fraud, I admitted. My lawyer says they could go to prison. Good. The word came sharp and immediate. I know that sounds harsh, but enabling has consequences. I spent 15 years in therapy learning that lesson. We talked for an hour while Sandra prepared more documents inside. Patricia painted a picture of grandparents I'd never known, alcoholics who stole from their children's piggy banks for beer money. She'd gotten out at 18 with a scholarship and iron determination. I sent Marie money for years, she revealed, every month hoping she'd use it to escape too. Found out later she gave it all to our parents, trying to buy their love with my success. She did the same with my money, just gave it to Jake instead. Patterns repeat until someone breaks them. Patricia's voice carried hard-won wisdom. The guilt you're feeling, that's their voice in your head, not your conscience. Your conscience is the one that finally said enough. A knock interrupted, Sandra beckoning me back inside. I have to go, but could we talk again? I'd like that. And Edna, when they escalate, and they will remember you're not abandoning anyone, you're saving yourself. There's a profound difference. Back inside, Sandra had pulled up additional discoveries. Your brother's been busy. He's listed as a beneficiary on 3 life insurance policies in your name. What? Small ones, 10,000 each. Purchased over the last 2 years. Premiums paid from an account linked to your mother. She studied my face carefully. In my experience, when family members take out secret life insurance policies, they're planning something. I finished, nausea rising. Jake's desperate for money. He owes dangerous people. We need to act fast. I'm filing emergency injunctions today, freezing any accounts with your information. But Edna, I strongly recommend you consider protection, a restraining order at minimum. I signed where she indicated each signature reclaiming a piece of my stolen identity. The forensic accountant she'd hired would trace every dollar bill in an airtight case. My family had declared war on my financial existence. Time to fight back with the only weapons that mattered: truth and consequences. One more thing, Sandra said as I prepared to leave. The house foreclosure auction is in 3 weeks. As co-owner on the deed, you could bid on it yourself. Buy it for the minimum, evict them legally. Why would I want that cursed place? You wouldn't. But sometimes the best revenge is showing them exactly what they lost when they betrayed you. The forensic accountant Sandra hired looked more like a college professor than a financial detective. David Huang spread his findings across the conference room table with methodical precision, each document a piece of evidence in my family's betrayal. Let's start with the systematic nature of this fraud. He began adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a coordinated multi-year operation targeting your identity specifically. The numbers told a story worse than I'd imagined. $212,000 in fraudulent debt spread across 17 accounts. Credit cards opened at stores I'd never visited. Utility accounts in 3 states. Medical bills for procedures I'd never had. The pattern suggests multiple participants. David continued highlighting transaction clusters. Your mother handled the online shopping accounts. 47,000 in QVC purchases over 3 years. Jewelry, electronics, collectibles, all shipped to various addresses to avoid detection. 47,000. The number felt cosmic in its irony. The same amount they stole from my mortgage payments. That's just QVC. Total shopping addiction spending across all platforms reaches 90,000. He pulled up browser history data subpoenaed from their internet provider. 6 to 8 hours daily browsing shopping sites. Classic behavioral addiction with financial destruction as collateral damage. Sandra leaned forward, studying a particular document. What's this about pharmaceutical purchases? Ah, that's where your brother comes in. David switched to a new set of papers. He's been using accounts in Edna's name to purchase prescription medications online. Oxycodone, Adderall, Xanax. Street value approximately 30,000 per month. He's dealing... My voice came out smaller than intended. Distributing, definitely. The volume suggests a network. David's expression grew more serious. Which brings us to the life insurance policies and your mother's interesting search history. The screen filled with screenshots that made my blood freeze. Accidental death insurance payout. How long does sleeping pill overdose take? Making suicide look accidental. Inheriting from adult children. The searches dated back 6 months, increasing in frequency and specificity. We need to involve law enforcement immediately, Sandra stated, already reaching for her phone. Oh, there's more, David interrupted. The house isn't just in foreclosure. Your parents took out 3 different equity lines using forged documents. Total debt against the property is $400,000. It's worth maybe $250,000 in this market. How is that possible? Different banks, different notaries, all dirty. This connects to a larger fraud ring we've been tracking. He pulled out a business card. FBI's been investigating similar cases. Your family's activities just gave them the break they needed. The door opened, and a woman in a navy suit entered. Agent Sarah Coleman, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Ms. Martinez called about the insurance policies. The room shifted from legal consultation to criminal investigation. Agent Coleman reviewed David's findings with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She asked pointed questions about Jake's associates, my parents, spending patterns, the timeline of each fraudulent account. Your brother's operation is part of a larger network, she confirmed. We've been tracking pharmaceutical diversions across 3 states. His name keeps surfacing, but we haven't had enough for warrants. Until now. What about the insurance policies? The search history? Concerning, but not immediately actionable. However, we can move on the fraud and drug charges today. She studied me carefully. Are you willing to cooperate fully? That means testimony evidence, possibly wearing a wire. A wire. Your brother's associates are dangerous. We need inside information. You're uniquely positioned as both victim and family member. Agent Coleman's tone carried no judgment, just pragmatism. We can offer protection in exchange. My phone buzzed, Grace texting frantically. Mom just called me screaming. Says FBI is at the house. What's happening? I showed the message to Agent Coleman. That would be our team serving warrants. We moved fast once Ms. Martinez contacted us. The next hours blurred together. Signed affidavits, recorded statements, evidence, cataloging. I authorized everything, each signature another step away from the family that had parasitized my existence. Grace arrived with Marcus, both looking shell-shocked. They're searching everything, Grace reported. Mom's having a breakdown. Dad just sits there staring at nothing. Jake tried to run, but they caught him climbing the back fence. With a backpack full of pills, Agent Coleman added, checking her phone, and a loaded weapon, charges just upgraded to include firearms violations. The House of Cards collapsed faster than anyone anticipated. By evening, the full scope emerged. Jake had been running drugs through the house for 2 years. The basement contained enough pharmaceutical evidence to charge distribution. Hidden cameras revealed steady traffic of buyers, all recorded on the security system my father had ironically installed to catch Jake stealing. Your mother knew, David confirmed, showing him bank records. She was washing the money through her shopping accounts, converting drug cash into retail goods that Jake would resell. That's why she spent so much, I realized. It wasn't just addiction, it was money laundering. Approximately 2 million over 5 years, Agent Coleman confirmed. Your mortgage payments were a tiny fraction of what moved through that house. They just got greedy wanting your legitimate income too. Sandra had been quiet, processing the implications. This changes our approach completely. We're not dealing with family dysfunction. We're dealing with a criminal enterprise that targeted you specifically because your clean income provided cover. I need air, I said suddenly, the weight crushing down. On the balcony, Chicago sprawled before me, indifferent to personal catastrophes. My family wasn't just broken, they were criminals who'd used my love as a weapon against me. Every childhood memory felt tainted, wondering when the exploitation had truly begun. Grace joined me, equally overwhelmed. Did you know any of it? I knew they were stealing. I didn't know I was funding a drug ring. The absurdity almost made me laugh. I thought I was just an ATM. Turns out I was their money launderer. What happens now? They go to prison. All of them. I faced my sister, seeing my own shock reflected, and we figure out how to build lives without them. Brittany called, Grace said quietly. Remember Jake's fake pregnant girlfriend? She wants to talk to you, says it's important. Back inside, Agent Coleman had set up a secure line. Brittany's voice came through shaky but determined. I'm not who Jake thought I was, she began. Agent Brittany Walsh undercover. I've been building a case against his network for 8 months. Another revelation that shifted everything. The fake pregnancy hadn't been Jake's idea, but part of Brittany's cover getting close to the family operation. She documented everything, including conversations about the life insurance policies. Your mother was planning something, Brittany confirmed. Jake needed money, fast owed the wrong people. She kept saying you were worth more dead than alive, that your insurance would solve everything. She was gonna kill me. The words felt surreal. Make it look accidental. Jake was supposed to invite you over for reconciliation. Your mother had pills ready. The plan was overdose staged as suicide from family stress. Brittany's voice carried professional detachment and personal disgust. I couldn't break cover to warn you directly, but I made sure that family meeting happened instead, hoping the fake pregnancy revelation would blow everything up. You saved my life by lying about being pregnant. Sometimes the best way to stop a murder is to start a family fight, she said with grim humor. Your leaving that night ruined their timeline. Now they're too busy with federal charges to hurt anyone. Dawn came dressed in federal authority. The raid on my childhood home began at 5:47 a.m., synchronized with similar operations across the city. I watched through Agent Coleman's laptop as body cameras captured the systematic dismantling of my family's criminal enterprise. The footage felt surreal. SWAT officers moving through rooms where I'd played as a child, now crime scenes filled with evidence. My mother's craft room, once the site of scrapbooking parties, contained boxes of items purchased with laundered money. Jake's childhood bedroom had become a pharmaceutical packaging center. Suspect Marie Stewart, you're under arrest for money laundering conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. The officer's words echoed through the laptop speakers as my mother was handcuffed in her nightgown, screaming about violations and lawyers she couldn't afford. Jake's arrest played out differently. Cameras caught him attempting to flee through the basement window, a duffel bag of pills strapped to his back. The pursuing officer tackled him in Mrs. Patterson's rose garden, the same roses I'd helped plant during better summers. That's $50,000 in street opioids, Agent Coleman noted as they cataloged the bag's contents, enough for distribution charges in federal court. My father's arrest broke something inside me. He didn't resist, didn't even speak. Just raised his hands in surrender, looking relieved more than frightened. The cameras caught him mouthing, "I'm sorry," repeatedly as they led him away. Initial processing suggests your father was minimally involved, Coleman observed, mostly guilty of willful blindness and failure to report. He might get a lighter sentence if he cooperates. Grace gripped my hand as we watched our childhood home become a crime scene. Officers carried out box after box of evidence. The neighbors gathered on lawns, filming with phones, turning our family's destruction into social media content. There's something else, Coleman said, pulling up additional footage. Your aunt in Florida, she's been receiving packages from your mother. Lots of packages. The investigation had spread to Aunt Sharon, revealing she'd been reselling the items my mother sent, taking her cut of the laundering operation. Another family member corrupted by easy money and flexible morals. By noon, the arrests made local news. Major drug ring busted in suburban home. My family's mugshots lined up like a twisted family portrait. My mother defiant, Jake sullen, my father broken. The reporters mentioned the house had been facing foreclosure, adding financial desperation to the narrative. Sandra arrived at the FBI office with paperwork and pragmatism. The good news is, with criminal charges filed, recovering your identity becomes easier. Banks don't want association with federal crimes. And the bad news? This will be very public. Your name's attached to the property of the fraud victims. Media will dig. She paused carefully. Your employer should hear from you before the evening news. The call to Richard Thompson went better than expected. He listened without interruption, then responded with unexpected support. Take whatever time you need, he said firmly. Henderson Industries values integrity. You reported the fraud, cooperated with authorities. That speaks to character, not scandal. The bail hearing that afternoon provided more drama. My mother demanded release, claiming medical conditions requiring treatment. The judge reviewed her search history about insurance payouts and denied bail, calling her a flight risk and danger to others. Jake's extensive criminal history earned him federal holding without possibility of bail. Only my father received consideration. Bail set at $50,000 he couldn't pay. I could pay it, I found myself saying to Sandra. He's the least culpable. You could, she agreed carefully. But should you? He knew about the theft and stayed silent, enabled their crimes through inaction. I thought about his broken expression, the relief in surrender. He's weak, not evil. Weak people enable evil to flourish, Grace interjected, surprising us both with her vehemence. He chose Mom and Jake over us every single time. Let him sit in jail and think about those choices. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Patricia Hawkins, met with us to discuss testimony. The trial would be complex, involving multiple defendants and agencies. She wanted both Grace and me as key witnesses. Your testimony establishes the pattern of exploitation, she explained. Financial abuse often goes unreported within families. This case could set precedents for protecting adult children from parental fraud. When will the trial start? 6 to 8 months. Your mother and brother are fighting the charges. Your father's attorney is already discussing plea deals. She studied us carefully. Are you prepared for character assassination? Defense attorneys will paint you as ungrateful daughters who abandoned struggling parents. They stole $200,000 and planned to murder me for insurance money, I stated flatly. I think we can handle some name-calling. That evening, Grace and I sat in my apartment watching news coverage. The reporters had discovered the family connection, my name now linked to the scandal. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some supportive, others simply curious about the drama. At least they used your DMV photo, Grace noted, trying for levity. You look professional, not criminal. A knock interrupted. Through the peephole, I saw Margaret Chen from work holding what appeared to be Chinese takeout. I opened the door cautiously. Figured you hadn't eaten, she said, simply raising the bags. Kung Pao chicken cures many ills. We sat around my dining table, Margaret filling the silence with office gossip and gentle normalcy. She'd been my informal mentor for 3 years, guiding my career with wisdom I desperately needed. You know, Margaret said eventually, studying me with familiar eyes, my sister made the news once too. 40 years ago, but still, family scandals feel like the end of the world until they're just another story people half remember. Something in her phrasing triggered recognition. The way she tilted her head, the particular cadence of her speech. I'd been blind to it, but stress had sharpened my perception. Patricia! I whispered, the pieces clicking together. You're Patricia Chen, my mother's sister. She smiled sadly. Guilty, though I go by Margaret now, less memorable. You've been mentoring me for 3 years. You knew who I was. I knew Marie had daughters. When you applied to Henderson, the name caught my attention. Then I saw your work ethic, your drive to succeed despite family burdens. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. I couldn't reveal myself without complicating your life, but I could guide you, help you avoid my mistakes. Does Mom know? No, and she won't. I'm listed as Margaret Chen in all company records, just another executive. Her expression hardened. I told you patterns repeat until someone breaks them. I tried to break them quietly from the shadows. You chose the harder path, breaking them in daylight. We talked until midnight, filling in 40 years of gaps. Patricia, Margaret, had built her success on the ashes of family abandonment. She'd watched me from afar, protecting, when she could, preparing for this inevitable collapse. The family money, I asked eventually. Grandfather's trust fund, Mom's lawyer mentioned it. Real, but complicated. He set it up after I left guilt money for driving away his meal ticket. Marie knows it exists, but not the details. Margaret smiled with quiet satisfaction. She definitely doesn't know I'm the trustee. That money becomes yours on your 30th birthday just as planned. You control it. I've controlled many things from the shadows, but now it's your turn to step into the light. She gathered her things, preparing to leave. The next months will be brutal. Trial media, family hatred. But you'll survive because survivors are what we are. Chen women who refuse to drown in others' dysfunction. The federal courthouse stood like a monument to justice long delayed. 6 months had passed since the arrests. 6 months of depositions, evidence reviews, and strategic meetings. Today, the trial would begin with a revelation nobody expected. I sat in the witness preparation room with Sandra and Patricia Hawkins, the federal prosecutor who'd become our fierce advocate. Grace paced nervously, her new law degree fresh enough to shine. She'd accelerated her studies, graduated early, and passed the bar with scores that made headlines at her school. Remember, Patricia Hawkins coached, answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate unless pressed. Their defense will try to paint you as vindictive daughters. Stay factual. Understood, I replied, smoothing my charcoal suit. The same type I'd worn to my promotion, now senior analyst, making $120,000 annually. Success that would surely fuel their narrative of abandonment. There's something else, Patricia Hawkins said carefully. The defense has a surprise witness. Your Aunt Patricia from California is testifying for the prosecution. Margaret. After months of shadows, she was stepping forward. Grace and I exchanged glances, understanding the magnitude. 40 years of hidden history about to explode in open court. The courtroom, filled with press family dysfunction, transformed into public entertainment. I spotted neighbors from childhood co-workers studying the drama, strangers drawn to scandal. My parents entered in shackles, orange jumpsuits, replacing their suburban respectability. My mother had aged dramatically. Prison didn't suit someone accustomed to QVC shopping and enabling criminal sons. She'd lost weight, her hair gray at the roots, cosmetics denied, but her eyes still burned with rage when they found mine. Jake looked worse. Withdrawal from his own product had left him gaunt, twitchy, the confident manipulator replaced by a hollow addict facing 25 to life. He didn't even glance our way, too focused on his shaking hands. My father broke my heart all over again. He'd refused plea deals, insisting on facing trial with his family, loyalty to people who'd used him as cover for their crimes. He offered a weak smile that I couldn't return. All rise for Judge Elizabeth Morgan. The judge commanded respect without demanding it. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, she'd overseen financial crime cases for 2 decades. Her reputation for seeing through family manipulation preceded her. Opening statements painted starkly different pictures. The prosecution outlined systematic fraud, pharmaceutical distribution, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Defense attorneys spun tales of struggling parents, addicted children, and daughters who'd abandoned family in their darkest hour. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake's attorney proclaimed, "you'll hear how Edna Stewart earned six figures while her family faced foreclosure, how she hired lawyers instead of helping relatives, how her actions drove desperate people to desperate measures. I forced myself to remain stone-faced, though rage simmered beneath professional calm. They were really going to blame me for their crimes, make me the villain in their destruction story." The first day established facts through FBI testimony. Agent Coleman detailed the investigation evidence seized the network of dealers Jake supplied. The numbers staggered even me. 2.3 million in drug sales over 5 years. My childhood home had been a suburban cartel. Day 2 brought forensic accounting that made jurors gasp. David Huang walked them through every fraudulent account, every forged signature, every stolen dollar. The shopping addiction emerged, not as illness, but as money laundering methodology, brilliant in its banality. Mrs. Stewart would purchase items with drug money, he explained, projecting receipts, jewelry, electronics, collectibles, clean merchandise that could be resold for legitimate funds. "Objection," my mother's attorney called. "Speculation about my client's shopping habits." "Sustained. Stick to financial facts, Mr. Huang." But facts were damning enough. $212,000 in identity theft. Credit destroyed future mortgage for their crimes. Several jurors took notes, mothers themselves perhaps, struggling to comprehend such betrayal. Day 3 brought Brittany Walsh no longer the pregnant girlfriend, but federal agent Walsh in full professional glory. Her testimony revealed the murder conspiracy in chilling detail. Marie Stewart discussed multiple methods for making her daughter's death appear accidental. Pills and wine during a reconciliation dinner, staged car accident, even hiring someone to attack her during a morning run. The courtroom stirred. Murder conspiracy transformed theoretical fraud into visceral threat. My mother's attorney objected repeatedly, each overruled by Judge Morgan's steady voice. Did the defendant take concrete steps toward these plans? Oh, yes. She researched life insurance payouts, purchased sleeping pills in excess of any prescription, and had Jake scout Edna's running routes. Brittany pulled up surveillance photos. These images show Jake photographing Edna's apartment building, documenting her routines. I hadn't known about the stalking. My skin crawled thinking of Jake lurking outside my sanctuary, planning violence for profit. Grace grabbed my hand under the table, both of us processing how close we'd come to tragedy. Day 4 arrived with unexpected drama. Patricia Chen, formerly Patricia Stewart, entered the courtroom like visiting royalty. 40 years in California had polished her into someone unrecognizable as Marie's sister. Designer suit, perfect posture, success, radiating from every gesture. My mother's intake of breath was audible across the room. She half rose before her attorney pulled her down, whispering furiously. The sister who'd abandoned her had returned for the final act. "State your name for the record." Patricia Chen, CEO of Chen Financial Solutions, born Patricia Stewart's sister to the defendant Marie Stewart. The next hours unraveled decades of family mythology. Patricia painted a picture of childhoods destroyed by alcoholic parents who stole from their children. She'd escaped at 18, but not before trying to save Marie. "I sent her money for 10 years. Patricia testified, voice steady, but eyes pained. Every month believing she'd use it to build a better life. Instead, she gave it to our parents, enabling their alcoholism until it killed them." Objection. Relevance to current charges. Yes. Goes to pattern of behavior, Your Honor. The defendant has a lifelong history of financial enabling and exploitation. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Chen. Patricia revealed documentation she'd kept for 40 years. Money orders letters begging Marie to leave evidence of funds diverted. The pattern was identical to my experience just a generation removed. When I learned my niece Edna worked at my company, I monitored her career, watched her sacrifice advancement to fund Marie's lifestyle just as Marie had done with our parents. Patricia looked directly at her sister, history repeating, because Marie learned exploitation as love. The defense's cross-examination tried painting Patricia as a cold abandoner, but she deflected each attack with facts. Yes, she'd left. Yes, she'd built success. No, she'd never stopped trying to help until help became enabling. One final question, Miss Chen. Do you believe your sister capable of murdering her daughter for money? Patricia's pause stretched long. The Marie I knew wouldn't have. But addiction changes people. Whether to substances shopping or toxic patterns, the Marie I see now who stole hundreds of thousands from her children. Yes, that Marie is capable of anything. My testimony came day 5. I'd prepared extensively, but nothing readied me for facing my parents as their victim rather than their daughter. The prosecutor led me through evidence methodically, each fraudulent account, each forged signature, each stolen dollar documented. Ms. Stewart, why did you continue paying the mortgage after discovering the theft? I hoped they'd use the time to get help, find jobs, address their issues. My voice stayed level despite the emotion underneath. I was trying to save them from consequences. And when did that change? When they moved Jake back home while planning to kill me for insurance money, I realized I wasn't helping them. I was funding their crimes. Cross-examination came from my mother's attorney, a sharp woman who clearly believed attack was the best defense. Ms. Stewart, you make 6 figures annually, correct? Yes. Own a luxury apartment. I rent a 1-bedroom downtown. Drive an expensive car. Company car allowance, Toyota Camry. She painted me as wealthy while my family struggled conveniently, ignoring why they struggled. Each question tried to spark guilt, make me the villain in their tragedy. I responded with facts, not emotion. You hired a lawyer to investigate your parents. I hired a lawyer after discovering identity theft. You could have helped them directly. I did help. For 7 years of mortgage payments they stole. You abandoned them in their time of need. I removed myself from an abusive situation that escalated to murder conspiracy. Judge Morgan finally intervened. Counselor, victim blaming won't change evidence. Move on. Grace testified next, her new attorney skills evident. She documented everything, presented evidence like a prosecutor herself. The stolen college fund years of enabling the systematic preference for Jake despite his crimes. My parents taught me love meant sacrifice, she stated, but only some of us were expected to sacrifice. Edna and I gave while Jake and our mother took. That's not love, that's exploitation. The trial's final week brought unexpected developments. My father's attorney announced he would testify against his co-defendants in exchange for sentencing consideration. The man who'd enabled through silence would finally speak truth. He took the stand looking decades older, orange jumpsuit hanging on his diminished frame. His testimony revealed the depths of his failure as a husband and father, each word seemingly extracted with pliers. I knew about the stolen mortgage payments, he admitted, eyes fixed on his cuffed hands. Marie said it was temporary, just until Jake got clean. I wanted to believe her. What about the identity theft, the credit cards and loans? I found out later. By then, it felt too late to stop it. He finally looked up, finding my eyes. I was a coward, chose the easy path of ignorance over the hard path of protection. His testimony painted my mother as the operations mastermind. She'd handled finances, directed Jake's dealing, orchestrated the money laundering. He'd been the willing fool working double shifts while crime flourished under his roof. The murder conspiracy, the prosecutor pressed. I heard them talking. Marie said Edna was worth more dead than alive. I told myself it was just talk frustration. His voice broke. I almost let them kill my daughter because confrontation was scarier than complicity. Cross-examination couldn't shake his admissions. Defense attorneys tried painting him as confused, coerced covering for his family, but clarity had finally come to my father, far too late, but genuine. Mr. Stewart, do you expect leniency for this testimony? I expect to pay for my cowardice, he answered simply, but maybe truth can start healing what lies destroyed. Jake's defense crumbled when 3 of his dealers flipped for reduced sentences. They detailed the network, his mother's involvement in washing money, the violence threatened against those who couldn't pay. One dealer, barely 19, described Jake recruiting him in high school. He said it was easy money, said his mom would handle the complicated parts. All I had to do was deliver. The kid looked haunted by choices that would define his future. People overdosed on what I sold. Kids died because Jake Stewart needed money for gambling. The prosecution's closing argument wove together threads of greed, addiction, and betrayal into a tapestry of criminal enterprise. Patricia Hawkins stood before the jury, my evidence spread before her. This isn't a case of desperate parents making mistakes. This is systematic criminality funded by a daughter's love twisted into weapon against her. Marie and Jake Stewart built a drug empire on Edna's credit, then plotted her murder when she tried to escape. Defense closings painted different pictures. My mother's attorney begged for understanding of shopping addiction. Jake's lawyer blamed everyone but his client. My father's new attorney simply asked for mercy, acknowledging guilt while highlighting cooperation. David Stewart was the least among conspirators. Weak, yes, criminal technically, but ultimately the one who chose truth when it mattered. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Grace and I waited in the courthouse cafe surrounded by others whose lives hung on 12 strangers' decisions. Margaret joined us, having extended her stay to see justice delivered on ghosts 40 years old. "Whatever happens," she said over tepid coffee, "you both broke the cycle. That matters more than verdicts." But verdicts mattered too. The forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. Judge Morgan called for silence in the packed courtroom. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find Marie Stewart guilty. My mother's wail echoed off marble walls. Each subsequent guilty verdict, money laundering, fraud, identity theft, drove nails into the coffin of her suburban respectability. 45 years to life, effectively a death sentence for a 60-year-old woman. Jake received similar justice. Guilty on all counts. Federal drug distribution, fraud, conspiracy. 25 to life with no possibility of parole. He stared straight ahead, finally understanding consequences were real. My father's mixed verdict reflected his cooperation. Guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, not guilty of the more serious charges. The judge would consider his testimony during sentencing, possibly reducing his 5-year recommendation to time served plus probation. As marshals led them away, my mother turned for one last look. The hatred in her eyes could have melted steel, but beneath it I caught something else. Recognition, perhaps, that her daughter had become what she'd feared most, strong enough to survive without enabling. Free. The media frenzy followed predictably. Suburban drug ring destroyed by daughter's courage. Family fraud exposed by victim's stand. My name appeared in every article, privacy, a casualty of justice. But support overwhelmed negativity. Messages from other financial abuse victims thanking me for showing escape was possible. 2 weeks later, my father sat across from me in the Federal Detention Center's visiting room. His sentencing hearing was tomorrow, our first conversation since trial. "I wrote letters," he said, sliding a manila envelope through the partition slot. "To you and Grace. Things I should have said years ago. Dad, I can't..." "Not asking for forgiveness, just asking you to read them someday, when you're ready." He looked healthier despite incarceration. "I've been attending therapy, learning about enabling codependency. Turns out cowardice is treatable if you're willing to face it. We talked for the allotted hour, not as father and daughter, but as humans, navigating wreckage. He'd filed for divorce, finally ending the toxic marriage that had poisoned everything. Plans for after release included continued therapy, a halfway house rebuilding from honesty's foundation. "I'm proud of you," he said as guards signaled time, "for having strength I never showed, for saving yourself when I couldn't save anyone." His sentencing brought unexpected mercy. Time served plus 3 years probation community service focused on addiction counseling. The judge cited his cooperation and genuine remorse. He'd serve no more prison time, though the cell he'd built through cowardice would last forever. Grace passed her bar exam with scores that earned job offers from prestigious firms. She chose the prosecutor's office instead, dedicating her career to protecting financial abuse victims. Our shared trauma transformed into purpose. My promotion to Director of Financial Analysis came with stock options and a salary that would have staggered my family, but money meant less now than the integrity behind earning it. I instituted new policies for identifying financial abuse patterns in our audits, protecting others from family predators. 6 months after the trial, Margaret invited Grace and me to San Francisco, her real office, not the satellite branch where we'd unknowingly worked together. Chen Financial Solutions occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise success, built on ashes of abandonment. "I have something for you," she said, producing documents requiring signature. "Your grandfather's trust plus 40 years of careful investment. Happy early 30th birthday." The number made no sense. 500,000 had grown to over 2 million through Margaret's stewardship. Generational wealth created from guilt, managed by the daughter who'd escaped, inherited by the granddaughter who'd repeated history. "I can't accept this," I protested automatically. "You already have. I'm just the messenger delivering what was always yours." Margaret smiled with satisfaction. Marie spent 40 years trying to access this money. Now it goes to the daughter she tried to destroy. Poetic justice has excellent returns on investment. 1 year after the trial, I stood in the conference room of the nonprofit I'd founded with trust fund money that felt like justice delayed but not denied. Financial Freedom Foundation occupied a modest office suite, but our impact reached across the state. We helped adult children escape parental financial abuse, offering legal resources, credit repair, and therapeutic support. Our 100th client graduated the program today. Sarah, our lead counselor, announced during the morning meeting. She's debt-free, credit restored, and started her own business. The success stories fueled our mission. Each person who broke free from family exploitation proved patterns could be shattered. We'd partnered with law schools, credit unions, and therapists specializing in financial trauma. What started as personal healing had become systematic change. Grace arrived for lunch, her prosecutor's badge still shiny with purpose. She'd successfully tried 3 financial abuse cases, earning a reputation as a fierce advocate for victims. The little sister I'd protected now protected others. "Guess who's eligible for parole review," she said over salads at our favorite downtown spot. "Jake." The thought of him free sent involuntary chills down my spine. "Mom. Model prisoner, apparently. Teaches literacy classes, attends therapy, found religion." Grace's expression mixed skepticism with resignation. Her lawyers requesting victim impact statements. "Are you providing one?" "Already written. 3 pages on why she should serve every day of her sentence." She stabbed lettuce with unnecessary force. I haven't decided. The admission surprised us both. Part of me wants her locked away forever. Part wonders if people can actually change. "She planned to murder you for insurance money," Grace reminded me. "That's not a mistake. That's evil." But evil felt too simple for the complexity of my mother. Mental illness, addiction, Generational trauma and choices had twisted her into someone capable of murdering her child for money. Prison might have unraveled some knots or simply taught her to hide them better. That evening, I met with Dr. Patricia Reeves, the therapist who'd guided me through trial trauma and into healing. Her office felt safe for exploring dangerous emotional territory. "Tell me about the parole review," she prompted. I'm conflicted. Wanting her imprisoned forever feels like vengeance, but forgetting what she did feels like enabling. I struggled for words. How do you balance justice with healing? You don't balance them. You choose which serves your recovery better. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. What outcome would give you the most peace? Knowing she can't hurt anyone else, but also knowing I'm not defined by her crimes against me. The truth crystallized as I spoke it. I want indifference, to be so healed that her existence or non-existence doesn't affect my life. We worked through the statement over several sessions, not supporting or opposing parole, simply documenting impact and moving forward. The final version expressed hope for her rehabilitation while maintaining boundaries that prioritized my safety. My father appeared at the foundation one afternoon, 16 months into his probation. He'd volunteered consistently at addiction centers, sharing how enabling destroyed families. His request to volunteer with us felt like another test. "I know financial crimes," he offered quietly, "how perpetrators think, justify, manipulate. Maybe that knowledge could help victims recognize patterns." The B board voted to allow supervised volunteering. He began teaching workshops on identifying enabling behaviors and financial manipulation tactics. Former victims learned from a former perpetrator, understanding bleeding prevention. "Your mother knows about my work here," he mentioned after one session. "She wrote asking me to advocate for her parole." Will you?" I wrote back with divorce papers instead. He smiled sadly. 35 years too late, but boundaries finally exist. Jake's situation differed entirely. 3 years into his sentence, he'd been transferred to maximum security after attacking another inmate over drug debts. Letters arrived monthly, each demanding money, threatening exposure of family secrets, promising revenge upon release. Classic manipulation tactics. My father noted during a workshop using Jake's letters as examples with identifying information removed. Cycles of rage, false remorse, and renewed threats. The pattern never changes without genuine accountability. The parole hearing arrived with media attention we'd hoped to avoid. Suburban drug mom seeks freedom. Headlines reduced complex crime to clickbait. I submitted my written statement declining to appear in person. Grace attended delivering her opposition with prosecutorial precision. Margaret flew in from San Francisco observing the sister who'd poisoned decades of possibility. She didn't speak, but her presence radiated judgment. Two sisters separated by 40 years of choices, one who'd built empire from ashes, one who'd burned every opportunity for quick profit. The decision came 2 weeks later. Parole denied. The board cited the severity of crimes, particularly the murder conspiracy. My mother would serve at least 5 more years before another review. Part of me felt relief, part exhaustion. Justice continued its slow grind. Life normalized into new patterns. The foundation grew, helping dozens escape financial abuse. My role at Henderson Industries expanded into national markets. Dating felt possible again. Trust rebuilt through therapy and time. I met Daniel at a financial conference, his gentle humor and steady presence offering partnership without suffocation. "You know my history," I warned over third date wine. "Family in prison, trauma around money trust issues that run deep." "Everyone has history," he responded. "Yours just made headlines. Mine stays buried in therapy notes." We built slowly, carefully, two people who understood that love without boundaries was just exploitation wearing a prettier mask. He met Grace at 6 months, Margaret at a year. Family redefined by choice rather than blood. The foundation's second anniversary brought unexpected guests. Three women who'd escaped their own family financial abuse after reading about our trial. They'd started chapters in their cities, spreading resources and support. The movement grew beyond my story into collective healing. "You saved my life," one woman said, tears flowing freely. "I thought I was alone crazy for questioning why my parents stole from me. Your courage to prosecute showed me I deserved better." That evening, I stood in my office looking at photos covering one wall, not family portraits, but success stories. Clients who'd reclaimed their identities, rebuilt credit, started fresh. Each face represented someone who'd chosen themselves over toxic loyalty. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Dinner Sunday, Marcus is making his famous lasagna. Bring Daniel if you want." Normal plans with chosen family. No crisis to manage, no money to hemorrhage, no threats to navigate. Just dinner with people who loved without taking, supported without suffocating, existed without exploiting. Another message followed this one from Margaret. "Board meeting next week. We're discussing your proposal for national expansion. Come prepared to dazzle." The mentorship that had started in shadows now flourished in sunshine. She'd guided me from victim to survivor to advocate. The inheritance she'd protected had funded freedom for hundreds of others. Patterns, broken cycles, ended futures reclaimed. My 30th birthday dawned with significance beyond chronology. The trust fund Margaret had protected for 4 decades officially transferred to my control its value, a testament to patient investment and fierce protection. But money meant less than the moment itself surviving to 30, despite my mother's murderous plans. The former family home stood empty before me, purchased at auction 6 months prior for the minimum bid. I'd outbid 3 developers, not from nostalgia, but from vision. Today, contractors would begin transforming the site of so much dysfunction into something healing. "Stewart House," the sign would read, "transitional housing for financial abuse survivors," where my mother had laundered drug money victims would rebuild credit, where Jake had packaged pills, counselors would offer therapy, where murder was plotted, new lives would begin. Grace stood beside me, hard hat perched on her prosecutor's power suit. "You sure about this? We could have let developers demolish it, built fresh somewhere else." "Trauma sites need transformation, not erasure," I replied, watching workers unload equipment. "Every survivor who stays here will know that places of pain can become foundations for power." The project had taken months of planning. Zoning variances, neighborhood meetings, architectural designs that honored healing while acknowledging history. Some neighbors objected, fearing property values would plummet. Others, particularly Mrs. Patterson, with her rose garden, supported transformation over abandonment. "Your mother would hate this," my father noted, arriving with coffee and conflicted emotions. 2 years into probation, he'd become our most effective volunteer teaching perpetrator psychology to victims seeking understanding. Good," Grace and I said simultaneously, then laughed at our synchronicity. He'd aged into acceptance therapy and accountability, carving new lines on his face. The weak man who'd enabled crimes had evolved into someone who owned his failures while building better. Not forgiveness, but forward movement. Richard Thompson attended the groundbreaking Henderson Industries, having donated significantly to the project. My position as VP of Strategic Analysis came with influence I wielded for change. Corporate social responsibility included supporting survivors of the kind of crime that had made headlines. The board's impressed. He mentioned watching the ceremonial first shovel of dirt. "Your proposal for financial abuse screening in our vendor assessments. Legal loves it. Protecting the company while supporting victims." Professional success built on personal survival. Every advancement felt earned through fire, not granted by connection. The executive I'd become stood on foundations of integrity my family had tried to demolish. Daniel arrived with Margaret, their easy conversation evidence of how chosen family expanded. He'd proposed last month, understanding that marriage meant joining not just me, but the complex network of survivors and advocates I'd assembled. His acceptance came without attempting to fix or minimize my history. Patricia sends regrets. Margaret mentioned using her sister's given name. The parole review stress triggered a health episode. Nothing serious, but the doctor recommended avoiding additional upheaval. My mother remained imprisoned, her second parole review denied more forcefully than the first. Letters had stopped after I'd returned them unopened for 6 months. Grace reported she'd shifted manipulation tactics toward other inmates running scams that earned additional time. Some people choose patterns over freedom, Dr. Reeves had observed. Your mother seems committed to remaining who she's always been, just in different circumstances. Jake's situation had worsened considerably. Moved to federal supermax after orchestrating drug distribution from inside, he faced new charges that would add decades to his sentence. His letters now went to lawyers, not family-seeking appeals that judges denied with prejudice. The groundbreaking ceremony drew media attention we'd learned to manage. Local news framed it as redemption story crime scene, becoming shelter victim, becoming victor. I gave brief statements focusing on future residents rather than past trauma. Every person who stays at Stewart House will know that survival is possible. I told reporters that family patterns can be broken, that choosing yourself over toxic loyalty isn't selfish but necessary. Construction would take 8 months. The house would accommodate 6 residents at a time, offering 3-month programs, combining housing therapy, legal support, and financial education. Grace had helped design the legal clinic component, ensuring residents could pursue justice while rebuilding. That evening, chosen family gathered in my apartment for the birthday celebration my birth family had tried to prevent through murder. Margaret presented a photo album she'd compiled secretly, my career progression, the foundation's growth, every milestone my mother had missed while imprisoned. You've built more in 5 years than Marie managed in 60, she observed. Success really is the best revenge. It's not revenge, I corrected gently. It's evidence that their way was wrong, that exploitation isn't love-enabling, isn't support, and family isn't defined by blood, but behavior. Grace raised her champagne prosecutor's precision in her toast. To 30 years, survived hundreds, helped, and cycles broken. To Edna, who showed us that fighting back and winning isn't just possible, but necessary. We drank to survival, to chosen family, to the foundation's expanding reach. 3 more cities had opened chapters each, led by survivors who transformed trauma into purpose. The movement grew beyond any individual story into collective refusal to accept financial abuse. I have something for you, Daniel said, producing an envelope. Not romantic, just practical. Inside incorporation papers for Stewart House as an independent nonprofit. He'd handled the legal structure pro bono, ensuring that transitional housing would outlive any individual involvement. Legacy protected through law, not loyalty. My phone buzzed with birthday wishes from clients, colleagues, and connections built on honest foundations. Each message reminded me that isolation wasn't safety's price. Community could exist without exploitation support, without suffocation. Mom knows it's your birthday, Grace mentioned quietly. Dad said she asked if you'd received her card. What card? The one she knows you'll return unopened. But asking lets her play victim to anyone who will listen. Grace's cynicism came earned through experience. Performance art in a prison jumpsuit. I felt nothing at the mention. Not anger, not sadness, just the mild interest one might show in weather patterns affecting distant cities. Indifference achieved through years of therapy and building life beyond her influence. The trust fund Patricia protected now funded futures for dozens of survivors. Stewart House would shelter those escaping what I'd endured. The foundation offered resources my younger self had desperately needed. Each success built on the ashes of my family's destruction. What would you tell 21-year-old you? Margaret asked as the evening wound down, the one about to start paying their mortgage. Run, I answered immediately, then reconsidered. No, that's wrong. I'd tell her that helping isn't helping if it enables harm, that love doesn't demand self-destruction, that family is built through respect, not blood. And if she didn't listen, then I'd tell her she'll survive anyway, that rock bottom has a basement, but also a foundation, that the family trying to destroy her will ultimately create someone strong enough to save others. The party ended with quiet contentment rather than raucous celebration. Survival didn't require spectacle, just steady steps away from those who'd harm us toward those who'd help us heal. I stood on my balcony, city lights spreading like possibilities below. Stewart House would open in 8 months. The foundation would expand to 10 cities within 2 years. My wedding to Daniel would be small, genuine, witnessed by those who'd earned presents through actions rather than accidents of birth. But tonight I simply existed as myself. 30 years old, professionally successful, personally healing, surrounded by chosen family who supported without suffocating. The woman my mother had tried to murder for insurance money had become someone worth more alive than any policy could pay. The greatest revenge wasn't success, or money, or even justice. It was indifference to their opinions, freedom from their influence, and the knowledge that every person I helped escape similar situations carried forward the liberation they tried to prevent. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more survivors seeking support, continued growth and healing. But tonight, I celebrated 30 years of survival and the absolute certainty that patterns could be broken, cycles could end, and choosing yourself over toxic family wasn't just acceptable, but necessary. Happy birthday to me. I whispered to the night, meaning it completely. The girl who'd paid their mortgage had become a woman who housed survivors. The daughter they'd tried to murder had lived to save others. And that was worth more than any inheritance, any revenge, any reconciliation they might dream of. It was worth everything. What's? Question for viewers. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? What gave you the strength to prioritize yourself? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear that survival is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity. Share this with anyone who might be struggling with family financial abuse. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward freedom. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish when the alternative is letting others destroy you. You deserve safety, respect, and the chance to build a life free from exploitation. May you find the strength to break harmful patterns and create the family you deserve, whether born or built. Until next time, stay strong, set boundaries, and know that your worth isn't measured by what you provide to others, but by who you choose to become, despite their efforts to diminish you.